Hey, welcome back to Pluralsight. I'm your instructor, Christopher Reese, and in this course we'll talk about application, data, and host security, specifically application security controls and techniques in this module. So this is an important module for a number of reasons, not the least of which it's good to have a basic understanding of the actual inroads that attackers can use to gain access to our systems. So we'll talk about some of the techniques that they use, such as fuzzing. And if you never heard that term before in this context, it sounds a little strange, but it'll make more sense when we cover it here in just a few. We'll talk about secure coding concepts, such as error and exception handling and input validation, and why it's important to make sure that our forms and our applications are secure so that they can't be taken advantage of and have things happen that we didn't intend. All right, we'll also talk about cross-site scripting, the prevention of cross-site scripting, and then cross-site request forgery, or CSRF, okay, and the prevention of that as well, what those things are. We'll talk about application configuration baseline, or the proper settings, and then we'll talk about application hardening, what that means, and then application patch management. Everyone's favorite topic, patching, whether it be hardware, software, systems, internal or customer facing. Everything pretty much in the IT industry needs to be patched in some form or fashion, whether it be a desktop, a server, a storage array, you name it. So we have to make sure that we understand where that fits into our security tool belt, so to speak. And then we'll talk about databases and the various types. Okay, if you've been around for a while, you probably are familiar with the term SQL or SQL, and you've heard of SQL databases. Well, there's a relatively new iteration called NoSQL databases, and we'll talk about the differentiation between these two and where there's the specific use cases are for one versus the other, as far as which is more applicable. And then we'll also talk about server-side versus client-side validation. Again, making sure that our applications don't accept data that we didn't intend, so that someone can't come in and put some malicious code into a form or into an application and basically crash it or take elevated privileges into that application. So let's go ahead and start off with the definition of fuzzing. So fuzzing is intentionally trying to crash a program or an application. Okay, fuzzing, basically we just throw a long string of random or kind of just nonsense data, and it's typically used in the context of a software testing technique, and it's basically automated, or it can be semi-automated, because we're throwing lots of different strings, lots of different combinations. Could be hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of combinations, and it involves providing invalid or unexpected or random data into the inputs of an application. Again, whether it's a web form or it's an actual kind of a standalone application, by putting in random data over and over and over again, just various iterations until we find something that crashes the application. All right, so with fuzzing, basically it's used by application designers or testers, and it can be done internal testing to find bugs and defects and security holes in our applications. So it has a legitimate place within the software development lifecycle, and just making sure that our things are hardened to a certain degree. But then also hackers can use fuzzing techniques as well. All right, so they can use these fuzzing techniques to identify zero-day vulnerabilities. And zero-day, as you know, is something, a vulnerability that's been found where there is no patch yet available. All right, so it's that interim period between when something's found and when the actual manufacturer or the developer creates a patch for it. So that kind of limbo period when there's no fix, that's a zero-day vulnerability. Or they can use the application or the techniques to crash applications, to crash websites, or to try to get in and bypass some of the security controls that have been put in place. So there are a number of fuzzing applications that you should be aware of, and if you want to drill down a little bit more on your own, I'll give you some examples here. Linux distributions like Kali Linux have fuzzing tools built in. All right, so there's a lot you can download, the kind of standalone tool sets, or some of these Linux distributions have them built in. So I'll show you a demonstration of Kali Linux in just a moment, just where the fuzzing tools are located. And then CERT has one called the Basic Fuzzing Framework that you can download from the website that you see here. And just to give you an idea of what it looks like, if you hit the website, you can go in and download that framework, and it basically will pop up a number of windows and so forth within a Linux shell and give you the ability to test certain fuzzing functions, and just to get an idea of how all that works. It's good just to get a basic understanding of how these things operate, right? Especially at this point in your security career. I'm not expecting you to be an expert in fuzzing at this point, but it's certainly something that you really should be aware of, so that you understand how to mitigate and how to either design controls around it or enforce and harden applications to prevent against these types of things. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at Kali Linux real quick and just see where the fuzzing applications are located.